Hi, Heather here from Creative Kiwi. Welcome to our step-by-step video on how to make a large applique Wicked Witch, all ready for this Halloween. She's a beauty. The 5x7 size, which I show in this video, makes a basically 10 by 17.5 inch finished design, whereas the 10 by 16 she's huge, 21 by 38 inches. That's nearly a metre tall. So perfect for your front door for Halloween. As always, a very huge thank you to my wonderful angel ladies who helped me out with ideas and testing the designs. Here's a couple that have been completed and finished. There's a few more on the way, but we've got the gorgeous Pinky Witch from Sandy and Beverly with the awesome orange accents. I love seeing the different fabrics being used in different colours. We couldn't do it without you, ladies. Let's get started. For all the hoopings, you're going to be hooping 2 layers of the fabric type water-soluble stabiliser, and we'll also pin at the edges. We do this to ensure that you get a nice stitch out and that the design doesn't shift within the hoop. Obviously, when you're joining pieces together, you don't want any movement. So from our years of experience, we definitely recommend the 2 layers of fabric type stabiliser and pinning at the edges. And let's get started with our Wicked Witch. So the first round of all our designs is always the outline, the placement line on the stabiliser. Then what we do is add a piece of beading. Now I use a thin polyester beading and just place it over the hoop and stitch to attach. If you're wanting to make the witch quite stronger, you can use a heavy felt for this part or bag beading. That will just add strength to the design. Now we're going to cut away the excess beading from the edges, and you'll see there's a slight gap between the placement line and the beading. This is correct. We do this to help with keep the bulk out of the seams. Now I'm showing the reversible version, so I'm actually using 2 different fabrics. I've got a velvet type on the front, but I'm just going to use a plain cotton fabric on the back. And you can either float the backing fabric under the hoop or you can tape in place. With the right sides of your fabric is facing outwards. Now I chose this velvet fabric for the witch's dress. It is very slippery, so I'm taping it fully onto the front of the hoop. If you've got a cotton fabric, you may not need to do this. So we're off to the machine and we're going to attach both the front and backing fabrics. The stitches around twice just so you have a nice cutting edge. Makes it easier for when you're cutting away your fabrics. We follow these same steps throughout every hooping, just the adding of the fabrics and the cutting away, which as you can see there, we're just cutting away the excess fabric. Now I get into a habit of cutting the backing fabric first, otherwise it's very easy to forget that you haven't cut away the backing fabric. So you're just cutting away the excess fabric on the back and then again on the front. This is a nice simple hooping to start with. It's just the one fabric, so it's quick and easy. Now, once we've cut away that excess fabric, we're just going to return the design to the hoop. If you're making the design reversible, you need to change your bobbin thread to match, and it's going to just zigzag around the raw edges and then complete the satin stitch detail. That's the first hooping completed. So we just take the design away from the hoop and cut away the excess stabiliser. Now on these satin stitch edges, you just cut kind of close, as close as you can without cutting the stitches. But on the top pieces where there's no zigzag or satin stitch, the raw edges, these are where it's going to be joined in a later part. So you can cut as close as you can to the stitch line. That way it just makes it easier when you're actually joining the pieces later. Again, we do this step on all parts of the design. There we go. You can see some of that fluff from that velvet. And there's the front and the back. Now we're going to go on to the second hooping. Again, we follow the same steps. The first round or stitch colour is the outline of the design. Now I use a dark colour just so you can see on the video. You can just use a matching or a neutral thread. So we do the same as before. We're going to place our batting over the guideline and we're going to stitch colour 2 to attach it. Now these, all the additional information about the colours used is in the written instructions. So this video is just to show you what we do, the actual details in the written instructions. So there we go, we're cutting away that excess batting. Now for this one, we're just going to put the front fabric on the design first. Because we're doing lettering, what we're doing is we just put the design on the front and add a backing fabric later, just so the back does look as neat as the front. So again, it's just going to stitch around twice. And I know it's hard to see with the dark colours, but you get the idea. And then we're just going to stitch the quilting, which is just a very simple line quilting on the front of the cauldron. Now, following what's in the instructions, you can just go ahead and stitch the wording on the cauldron, or if you prefer, you could add your own wording. We do all that at this step before we add the backing fabric. Now, this time I'm just going to float the fabric under the hoop. You can see I've got the right side facing downwards, and I'm just lifting up my hoop, floating it under and ensuring that you can see that the fabric's completely under the hoop. Or you can remove the hoop and tape your backing fabric on the back. It's completely personal preference. Often where it's just one piece of fabric like this, I just do floating. Then we're stitching the last colour just to attach the backing fabric. Now we're back to trimming the excess fabric from the design. Again, get in the habit of trimming the back first. Now we're back to the machine and we're going to do a zigzag of the raw edges, but it also leaves a gap where you're going to do your first join, so it just helps you to see where the fabrics are joined. So I've done it in orange thread, but you don't need to. You can use a matching thread. But you can see how there's a gap on that, I guess, right side from this one, where there's no stitching, no zigzag. That's because we're going to join our dress. And just like a jigsaw, we place it. So you're going to match the stitch lines. So there's slight overlap. And you can see it just fits in there like a jigsaw. So you match the top part and the bottom piece where the cauldron fits. Right along there. And tape in place. Now we're back to our machine and we're stitching the joining stitch, which is a zigzag that just zigzags down along those two raw edges. So we want to make sure that it covers both. So you can see with the orange thread, we've caught both sides of the fabric in. Everything looks okay. At this point, you would change your bobbin thread to match the cauldron and then go back off and finish the design, which is just the second stitch edge of the cauldron. That's your first piece joined. Again, we take the design out of the hoop and cut away our excess stabilizer. As before, just cut close to the second stitch, but you can see we're going to join that piece later, so cut as close as you can to the stitch line. That's piece 2. On to hooping number 3, and we stitch the placement line onto our stabilizer. Now this is quite a small wee piece, so depending what sizes you're doing, you may be able to use a smaller hoop. But we follow the same steps. We place our beating over the guideline and stitch to attach. Now there's a few more fabric pieces on this piece, so you'll see on this beating guideline, we have a guide for where the different fabrics are going to go. It's not exact, it's just a guide. So we're cutting away that beating. Right, we're going to do the first part of the fabric, which is what I'm calling her cape. I've done it in a black design. So we're putting the fabric on the back of the hoop first, taping it in place first. That's just over that top guideline. Off to our machine, and we're going to attach that fabric of her cape. Now, I've also included a very simple quilting design of a spider. Very hard to see on the dark. It was very understated, but you can certainly choose to stitch it or not. If you don't want the quilting, just skip that colour. So we're just going to cut away the excess fabric away from the other pieces of the segment. Now we're just going to do her arm. Now I'm making her a green witch, so we've got green fabric. So again, putting the fabric on the back of the hoop first, and then taking it to the machine to attach. We're just cutting away the excess fabric, just like any applique design. And the next bit is her dress. Yes, it is. It's her dress fabric. So again, I've used the plain cotton on the back and the slippery velvet on the front. Back to our machine just to attach that fabric. This time we can cut away all the excess fabrics because we've finished adding everything. So the next step is just back to the machine, and I'm going to do a zigzag around all the raw edges just to keep the registration. It's just so nothing moves within the hoop while we're doing our stitching. If you're making reversible, you'll need to change your bobbin thread. I'm not going to show every colour stitching out. You can follow the details in the instructions. For that particular one, you've got the dress satin stitch, the cape satin stitch, and arm satin stitch. No joining in this one. So again, we're just going to cut away the excess stabiliser as close as we can to the raw edges. It's a little bit fiddly, this one. It's the smallest piece of all the designs, of all the segments. Onto the fourth hooping. The same process, stitch your outline or placement line on the stabiliser. Put your batting over the guideline and stitch to attach. And you can see it stitches the guideline for the different fabric placement. Next, we trim away that excess batting. Now, the first fabric we're going to add is the hat. Now, I've just used one piece of fabric. You can use two pieces on the back because there's two separate parts of the hat that stitch. Back to our machine to attach the hat fabric. I've included a shading. There's a bit of a shading aspect here on that second part of the hat. And we're going to cut away the excess. Now, the reason I've done the fabric placement like this is I know a lot of you like to use fur and fancy fabrics for hair. So I've just done this so that your hair is good at last. So that's why we've done the hat first. Either way, you can see you're just cutting away the fabric, excess fabric away from the design. Now we're adding her face fabric. You don't need to have a green witch. There you go, we're just attaching that face. Now we're going to stitch the face details at this point. So if you're making the design reversible, you need to change your bobbin thread to match the different colours, which is the three eye colours, white, black and blue, and then the mouth. Here we go. And we're just going to trim away that excess fabric where the hair goes. Now I've used a grey fur. It was quite a thick fur for the front of the hoop. For the back of the design, I'm just using a plain cotton. I just thought 2 layers of the heavy fur might be too much for my machine. You can see there, I've just got a grey fabric. Now, because I'm using quite a heavy fur, I've got a piece of the plastic Solby type stabilizer on top of the fur. And we're just going to stitch that down. It's time to cut away all the excess fabric on the back of the hoop. The same for the front of the hoop. Now we're back to the machine, which does the zigzag along the raw edges, but leaves gaps where we're going to join pieces to this design. So we'll see the gap. That's where we're going to start putting our puzzle pieces together. And we're matching the stitch lines on top, so just a slight overlap. Now you can slow your machine down or stop and start as you need for these joins. The main thing is that it covers, you see that the zigzag covers both sides of the fabric or secures both sides of the fabric. And see, I've done it in white to show the contrast for you. Now we're off to just complete the design with the different colours. So have a look at the instructions and do all the different satin stitches. And the last bit, just cutting away the stabiliser. Just ensuring along that top edge you cut as close as you can to that raw edge for when we do the next join. And the next hooping is her hat, so it's quite a quick one. It's just the one colour hat. So we're stitching the placement line. Now, if you want to add a hanging tab, just follow that guideline with a folded piece of ribbon and just tape it in place before you add the beating. We're cutting away the excess beating. And as I say, this is a simple hooping, this one. We've just got our one piece of hat fabric. Now you can either tape your backing fabric on the back of the hoop, or, as I do with just this one piece, float the backing fabric underneath the hoop. Particularly with the dark colour, you can see that it's going to cover all the edges. Completely personal preference. We're going to stitch the next colour to attach those fabrics. And then we've just got some very simple line quilting. Again, you can choose to do that quilting, or you can skip it if you're using pretty fabric that you don't want the lines on. And we're just going to cut away that excess fabric on both sides. As before, we're back to the machine, which does a zigzag around the raw edges, but leaves a gap where we're going to join the hat, which is along that long edge. And there we go. She's starting to look better now with her hat. And you just match those raw edges, tiny overlap, and then tape in place. Back to the machine to do the joining stitch. As I say, stop and start your machine if you need to. Slow it down, whatever works for you. Do a quick check that it's covered or secured both edges. And if you're happy with that, make sure you've got the right bobbin thread in and go through and just finish the satin stitch edge, which for this design is just the one colour lace. Cut away the excess stabiliser without cutting off the hanging tab, which I'm sure we've all done before, and on to the next hooping. So we've got the placement line. We add our bitting and stitch it down. There's a few fabrics for this one, so we've got the different guidelines. Cut away our batting. And we start placing our fabrics. So the first one, and this is all in the instructions, is our dress fabric. And it's slinky, horrible fabric. It looks good, but terrible to sew. Cut away the fabrics, or the excess material away from the fabrics. The next fabric is her cape fabric, so we're just pinning that on the back. Again, on this one, there is some subtle quilting if you want to use it. Otherwise, you can just skip the colour. I just wanted there to be a little something on there. It's just a spider web and some stars. Then we're off to cut away that excess fabric from the cape fabric on the back of the hoop and then on the front of the hoop. Next, we're doing the fabric placement for her spoon. I've decided she's got a beautiful golden spoon. So we're taping that fabric on the back and again on the front. Off to the machine to attach the fabrics. Then back to cutting away that excess. Next, we do the final fabric, her arm, her nice green arm. And back to the machine just to attach that. Now we're cutting the excess fabric away on the back of the hoop, in the front of the hoop, and that's it for the fabric placement. So we're back to the machine just to do the initial zigzag of the raw edges and to leave the gaps for where we're going to join. So we're just going to place those top pieces, again like a jigsaw. You've got those little bumps that you can all match up, and obviously the top of the design and the raw edges where the zigzag is. So you've got all those guides to help you work out where she fits. And then back to the machine to do the zigzag join. I think she's looking pretty cool. We'll just check and make sure the zigzag is joined and secured both pieces. Now we're going to do the next join. Again, like the jigsaw, we're just going to fit our completed piece in along the edges. And do our joining stitch. Now, just following the instruction sheets, just do all our different colours. So we've got the satin stitch for quite a bit there. We've got the cape, the dress, the arm, the spoon. And so this is all in the written instructions. Trim away the excess stabiliser. And cut as close as you can to those raw edges, to the stitch line on the raw edges. So we're ready for the last joining or the last hooping. So the placement line goes on the stabiliser. Add our batting. Stitches the different guidelines for the different fabrics. Cut away the batting. And we start the fabric placement. So we're doing her hand first. These little scraps of fabric. Now, it's getting late in the day here. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I've actually made a few errors here. So the first thing is you can cut away all that excess fabric around her hand. There's no need to leave bits like I have here. And the next bit, I put the wrong fabric. So on here, I've got the dress fabric, but I've got the shawl fabric, but it should be the purple satin. I'll show you how I fix it later. And so it was a Sunday afternoon. I was getting a bit jaded, I think. Again, just cut away all that excess fabric. Now, this next bit's there's the edge of the cauldron plus the soup or whatever brew she's making. So you put a whole piece of the cauldron fabric. And then it stitches a guideline where we cut out the actual soup part. So I show here, this is actually personal preference and up to you how your machine likes bulk. So on the back, I have actually cut away the cauldron fabric, and I do cut away the centre bit. It's hard to see, but there is a guideline on there where her soup fabric's going to go. So you can do this. You can choose to do this, where you actually cut away the inner pieces. And see, then I finally decided to cut away the hand piece. Now, on the front of the hoop here, I just show the other option, which is instead of cutting out that centre piece, you can just place your fabrics over the top. It just really depends on if you've got bulky fabric. See, I just place it over the top. Either way, you take the backing tape your backing fabric on the back and your front. And that's her soup. Nearly there. We're off to cut away that excess fabric on the front and the back. And now we're just going to add that last piece of fabric. You see I'm using my scraps there. It's a good thing about applique. You keep your little pieces because you will use them. And we're off to attach that spoon. For the last time, just cut away that excess fabric on the back of the hoop and on the front of the hoop. Now we're off to the machine to do that final zigzag before we do the join. Right, ready for the last join. So we're getting those raw edges and we're going to fit her in just like a jigsaw. There's a bit to join here, so you may need a few more extra pieces of tape. And you're just basically fitting it around. So we're back to our machine. You can see I stop and start a few times here. So we're stitching up towards the hand. And I just don't like stitching near tape myself personally, but I am taking a bit more time with this one. So I'm just, as you can see, I'm guiding it through. And we're stopping because I don't want to stitch over the tape. And there we go, we're getting to the last part. The last join is done. Now, it was at this stage, late on a Sunday afternoon, I realised two things. One, my battery was running out on the camera, and I had the wrong piece of fabric on the design. So I just show you my fix. I didn't record it because I didn't have enough battery. So what I did was I just placed a piece of the correct fabric, it's such a small piece, of the velvet over the entire design and skipped back to the colour attachment and attached the fabric again, then just cut away that fabric and carried on. Which was just stitching the final colours, with changing the bobbin and stitching the final colours. So you can see the photo there of her completed. Okay, so it's a new day now. It's Monday now, and I have a recharged battery. So I'm just finishing off this design, which is just removing the excess stabilizer from the edges. There we go. So I've just taken that solvy off so you can see how fluffy her beautiful grey hair is. So the very final step is to remove the water-soluble stabilizer completely away from the design. So you can do as I'm doing here, which is just using hot water and a Q-tip to go around those edges. Some ladies like to soak the entire design in hot water to remove all traces of the stabilizer. It really is personal preference. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope it helps you with creating a design, and please share your design, your finished design, on the Creative Kiwi Facebook group. I just love seeing what you guys do, and it always looks so magic with the different fabrics and the different ideas that you add to these designs. Thank you.